Welcome everyone to day 2 of EA Global Summit 2022. This is Juhi from EA Global Summit organizing team. Firstly, thanks to everyone for your continual interest in joining us for this session. This session is by Stephen McGuire from Sparx Services Australia, presenting tool tips and tricks for EA practitioners. We will be muting all the participants throughout the session, and if any of you are having any questions during the session, please use the Q&A window to drop your questions to the speaker. We will be reading out a couple of questions to the speaker at the end of the session. To enable collaboration and communication with Stephen and other EA practitioners directly after the session, we request you to visit the dedicated channel for this session in Microsoft Teams. All presenters, including Stephen, have kindly accepted to stay in the channel to have a one-to-one discussion and answer your queries. The link to the MS Teams channel is posted in the chat window for your quick reference. If anyone is having any difficulties in connecting to Teams, please reach us in the chat window or write to us at registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. Thanks once again for your continual support and interest in EA Global Summit 2022. Looking forward to the wonderful session with Stephen. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jenny. Welcome to this session on tips and tricks for the EA practitioner. My name is Stephen McGuire, and I'm the CEO and Principal Modeler at Sparx Services here in Australia. I guess I'm a veteran, having used Enterprise Architect for more than 21 years. We're running Enterprise Architect live today, and I'm pleased to say that we won't be looking at any static PowerPoint or Google Slides. Everything will happen in real time. One thing I want to point out from the jump is that this is not a training session, but rather a presentation of ideas, and there'll be ample opportunity to watch the session again any number of times when the video is released. So don't worry if there's something that you don't understand or something that you have missed. You can watch it again. We're going to move through the tips and tricks at a decent speed. We have a number of different levels of expertise with us today. Some people are novice modelers and some of them very experienced. So I've pitched the material at a level and a pace that I think will be appropriate to everyone. Let's have a look first at the About screen. So here we are in the About screen. I'm using 16.0 and build 1605, which is one of the latest builds, and we're using a native local SQLite repository. In your own work, you'll probably be using a much more robust database, but this is convenient for this occasion. This is a local QEAX file that allows multi-user access. The QEA files are SQLite files that replace the MS Access-based EAP files that you might be familiar with in earlier versions. Let's have a quick look at the repository setup and the perspectives to see what the way that the model's been set up. Firstly, security has been enabled, and let's have a look at some of the users. We've got an administrator, we've got Captain Hook. You can see there's a theme from Neverland. I've got myself there, and Peter Pan. Now let's have a look at the groups that people belong to. Peter Pan belongs to a group called Business Process Modeler. Now, this is important to drive aspects of the tool. So groups drive many aspects of the tool. If we go and have a look at the perspectives, we can see that we've got some model-based sets, and we've got a business process modeler as a model-based perspective. This allows you to do all sorts of clever things in terms of restricting some of the elements and features of the tool. Let's just click on this for a moment, and we'll go and we'll just launch this diagram, the process A diagram. Now, I've deliberately not included modeling, model domains. So I've deliberately used class A, activity A, just to reduce the noise. We did an experiment a bit earlier and we found that people were being distracted by that. So for this exercise, which is largely about the tool features, we're not worrying about the semantics of the model. Now, if I look at the toolbox for this, you can see the toolbox there has got the full gamut of BPMN elements and connectors. But if I change perspectives now and go into this model-based set, you'll see that the list reduces. And this is a very useful device. And if I go and look at how that occurred, let's look at the perspectives. And the way that that's occurred is I've got a model-based perspective, and I've only got one perspective here, and I've got one included technology. But you notice that it says here strict. Now, some of you may be familiar with setting up model-based sets before, but not using strict. If I look at that and click on restrictions, you can see that what's happened is that I've got particular elements selected for the BPMN notation, and that is what's restricting the set of available elements to the modeler. So that's a very useful thing if you've got people that are that you want only to use a particular part of the language, and that can be with any technology, with any language, with any framework. So it's a very, very powerful thing. You can set, restrict elements, and you can restrict. You can see the full set of elements there, and I've just gone and ticked the ones that I want. So that's a first tip, using model-based perspective, setting a technology there, and then going and restricting the elements that people have got available to them, elements and connectors, and diagrams for that matter. So let's have a quick look at that again. We can look at the diagrams one. There are a number of diagrams, choreography, collaboration, conversation diagrams that most of business modelers won't use. So we've restricted those as well. Anyway, that's a little bit about perspectives and a little bit about how the model's been set up. So let's close these windows and let's get started on our journey. The first thing we're going to do is set a workspace. So I'm using the portal window and I'm using the workspaces portal, and I want to set a core modeling workspace. So this defines the layout of the windows on the model. So let's launch the first diagram. We're going to launch this this diagram here, and it's a simple diagram. I'm just going to revert something that. So when we start this diagram, we can see that we've got this cross line here, which is annoying. And if I was to go to the preferences and look at the preference window, so let's look at that. We'll go to preferences, we'll look at diagram, and we'll look at this on the diagram one, we've got enable connected jumps. So we can take that off, uncheck that, and you notice that the jumps go away. But that jumps is quite a useful thing to do. So you can turn the jumps on, and that makes it a little bit better. It's still annoying and that the line's crossing, so let's go and have a look at some of the tools that we could use. We'll use these layout diagrams tool. Let's use this circle one here and apply that and see whether that does anything useful for us. So we'll apply that, and that seems to make things a little bit worse. Many of the layout tools work in specific situations. Let's choose another one, which is, well, let's reverse that, undo that thing first, get back to our state. Let's now use the auto route and apply that. Now that's useful because the diagram's a little bit tidier, but it's still a little bit annoying. And what I would really like to do is to be able to maybe put another class C onto the diagram and make the connector short between class B and class C. I'm going to right mouse click here and say find in the browser, and I'm going to try and put another class C onto the diagram. Now, those who have used Enterprise Architect before will know that this will be a problem. The message says the diagram already contains an instance of this element we're trying to add, so I can't paste it onto the diagram. So I'm a bit stuck, but fortunately EA comes to the rescue. So what I can do is I'm just going to revert this, use Control Z, the undo, to revert that diagram back to that position. Now I'm going to right mouse click on this and use a feature called virtualize connector ends. I'm going to choose the source. Now you see that I've got another class C on the diagram, and that's very, very useful because now my diagram is laid out reasonably well, and I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy with that layout. But let's have a look at what's actually going on in here. If I change the color of this one, so I change the layout just to style, and I'll change it to this green color maybe. You notice that both of them change at the same time. In fact, whenever I select the element, it displays like that. Now, if I add other properties, so if I went to the features window to add another attribute, and I've got that class selected, and let me just add another attribute, and then I'm giving it a fictitious name, and you see it gets added to C, but not to the other class. In fact, I can't make any changes to that class C. Nevertheless, it's a very, very powerful device to be able to set out, lay out the diagrams. So what's the benefit of this to you? It allows you to reduce the visual complexity of diagrams. So very useful thing. So I'm going to close the features window, and let's close this diagram as well. Notice a little arrow that I can click to get back to where I came from, which is it was launched from the main window, from this opening home window. I'm just going to turn my video off to save a little bit of bandwidth, so I apologize for that. Right, let's have a look at some keyboard shortcuts, which are interesting. You're not going to be able to see what I'm doing, so I'm going to have to explain to you what's happening. There are a number of people who prefer to use the keyboard, and many of them are power users that get much more productivity out of the keyboard. So now I'm holding the Alt key down. Daisy, click back in here. And you notice that a lot of little black labels have been presented there on the screen. I'm going to choose the P for publish ribbon. So I'm hitting P on my keyboard, and now it's going down to another level. I'm going to hit E, which is the second one from the right, again on my keyboard. And now I'm going to hit E again to export the model. And now I can just use the Tab key to export. And the model has been exported. I could view that XML if I wanted to, but you can see that I've done all of those operations from the keyboard. So the tip with that is that this is going to speed up actions by reducing mouse movements. And sometimes I play, you know, I get a bit bored with what I'm doing, and I say, okay, for 2 hours, I'm just going to use the keyboard and nothing else. And I can do all my modeling work pretty much without touching the mouse. So very useful thing in speeding up actions, reducing the mouse movement. Now, one thing that another thing is viewing multiple diagrams simultaneously. This is a curious thing, because if I open up a couple of diagrams here, I'm going to open up this diagram, and now I'm going to open up another diagram. And you can see that they open up into different tabs. But the good thing about Enterprise Architect is the flexibility that you're able to use with the user interface. I can simply click and drag. So I just clicked and I dragged that diagram. Now it's floating around there on the monitor, and I could move it onto my other monitor if I wanted to. But I can also dock it here into the workspace. So now I've got it docked against the edge of that, and I can dock it anywhere I like, right? So that's a very useful thing. And I can have any number of diagrams open. And lots of times you're working on two different aspects of a model, and you want to be looking at one diagram and the other. So that's enabling two models to be viewed together creates a richer visual narrative, even when you're presenting to an audience. Now, let's have a look what happens when I make a change on this diagram. So I'm on this diagram here, and I'm going to make a change. Let's put a connector between class B and class E, and let's make it a, actually, let's go and change my perspective. I just realized I've still got that perspective on, and I'll go back to all because I had a restricted set of options there. So that was restricting what I could do with this model. Let me now make this connector, and I'll make it a dependency. And look what happens. The other diagram changes straight away. It doesn't have the same style. It takes the style of the diagram. Let me now do something different. I'm going to delete this connector from the model. And now what I want to explain to you is that this can be quite annoying if you've got a finished diagram like the one on the left-hand panel that you want to be presented in a particular way, but some other modeler, it could be yourself, goes to another diagram and adds another connector, and suddenly it pops up on your diagram, and you're just about to show it to an audience, to your customer, and it pops up, and you think, golly, that's really annoyed my presentation. So what I can do is use an option on the diagram called freeze visible. So under the connectors option on the diagram properties, there's an option called freeze visible. Now, if I turn that on by checking it there, this diagram has got all its presentation options frozen, and the connector, no change to a connector will affect it. So let's now go back now and put that dependency back on again and see what happens. So there's my dependency back on, and you can see in the other diagram that hasn't happened. So it hasn't interrupted with my diagram. So that's a very useful thing. So what does it do? The benefit to you is it reduces the concern that your diagrams won't be well laid out and will have you know, things on them that you didn't expect, and reduces the time spent on perhaps hiding connectors when they are inadvertently added. So the freeze visible is a useful thing. Alternatively, someone might want to leave freeze visible off so that they pick up any changes that are going on anywhere else in the model. Now, let's look at some other things. Element IDs. Many modelers want to have a unique ID for an element, which is useful in meetings when you're talking about a particular process or a particular class. It might be easier to to describe it by its ID, much the same way as accountants do when they're talking about GL accounts. They often use the GL account number, A71-4 for a particular account name. Enterprise Architect does have a facility called auto counters, and it has some limitations, and it can't guarantee that the numbers are unique. But when they're dished out, they are unique, but they can in the end become overlapping, which can be annoying. Let's close these diagrams here. So I'll save that one. Again, press the little button to get me back to there. And let's have a look at this diagram here. Save the changes to that. Now, you can see on this diagram, well, I've got a number of things, number of elements on here. I've got an activity called Manage Bookings. I've got a class, another class, and I've got a functional requirement. Now, go back to my layout ribbon. If I dragged a requirement onto this, let's drag a non-functional requirement on. It comes on and it's got that there in its what you'd expect. It's got a name called non-functional requirement. If I drag a functional requirement on, I might not have turned this on. So let's go on. Nothing happens there either. So let's go and look at how we can make these counters work. So if I go into settings and go into referencing auto names and counters, if I look for the requirement element here, so this is a generic requirement element in EA, and I'm going to look at a stereotype of functional requirement, and I'm going to go OK to that. And I've got a number of things set up here for the alias. So there's a prefix, a counter, which will be incremented from that number, and a suffix that will go after the counter. And I can choose apply on creation. So I'm going to click on that and save it, save and close. Now I'm going to add a functional requirement again, see what happens. This time it gets an alias called requirement 006, and if I put another one on, it gets a requirement, a number 007. So it's incrementing all the time. I can go and change that number now to the previous one, 6, which is a little bit of a limitation on that functionality. Now I've got 2 elements with the same ID. So that's a powerful thing. I'm going to turn that. Off again now under settings, auto counters. So you can see that you can do it for any element and any stereotype, which is useful. And I'll choose my functional one again, and I can turn the functionality off and say, hey, don't create that alias anymore. So let's go and have a look at another way of doing this. So we're going to look at now at a model add-in. And some of you may not have used model add-ins before, but they're a very powerful way of manipulating and refactoring the repository, performing computational work on the model. So to make this work, we're going to go to the specialized ribbon. And if you look at this, I've got all of these disabled. So what I'm going to do is enable this particular add-in, this cookbook one, and I'm going to say load on startup, and I'm going to apply a group to that and say I only want administrators, people that are administrators, to do it. So Peter Pan is not an administrator, and he wouldn't be able to wouldn't be able to do that. So let's go OK to that, but we'll need to restart the model. So what I'm going to do is I'll just save this diagram, go back, and I'll close the repository and open it back up again. And EA will launch again. And once that launches, I'll load the model again. I'll go in as Captain Hook, and let's go back to our diagram. Close the features window, go back to our diagram, and let's have a look now at the specialized ribbon. Now you can see that the add-in has been loaded. There's an extra icon here. So that's a useful thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new element, and now we'll see what happens now. So we'll create another functional requirement. Remember that we've got those turned off. And if I do that, you notice that now we've got something different happening. We're not using the counters anymore. We've got an alias of 760. And we've got this ID up here, and also the name is containing that ID as well. So how did that happen and what's going on? Let's have a look at the model add-in. So if you are a novice modeler or someone working from the business space, maybe just put your sunglasses on for a minute, because this is a little bit of code going on here. But let's have a look at what's happening. This is the model add-in, and the good thing about the model add-ins, other than over on top of the scripting facility, is that we can listen to all sorts of events. So all of the events that go on, like post new events, changing attributes, all sorts of different events that we can listen to. And our add-in is listening to a particular event, and it's the on post new. Let's have a look at the code, and we can see that there's some code in there, and the code is changing, doing some things on the repository. What it's actually doing is it's getting the internal ID of the element and posting it into the alias. So that's a useful thing to do, because you're guaranteed that that ID is unique. What it won't do is it won't give you a sequential number, but neither will this other functionality with the auto counters, because those numbers will get out of sync depending upon which project you're working on. This method gives you a huge amount of flexibility and guarantees that these numbers are unique. Now I'm using a trick here that you may not have seen before as well. I'm displaying the alias on the element as well. So if you haven't seen that before, that's what's going on. I've put a setting in the repository to display the alias on the elements as well. And so you can see here, manage bookings at 709. So if you were talking to someone in a conversation, you could say, hey, it's process 709. Okay, let's leave that. The advantage of that is that you've got infinite flexibility with the way that you deal with counters. You can you could apply them with the scripting, with the model add-in in very unique ways. Gives you a lot more flexibility. Now, another thing that happens with diagrams is that, let's close these cookbooks for a moment. I'll leave that cookbook open actually, because we might be talking about that in a little bit. Let's open the customer domain window again, and let's have a look at these connectors. Now, one thing I would want to do is I might want to make multiple changes to this diagram, to the properties on this diagram. Now, clearly, I can go to the properties window over here, and I can change things like the status. I could go, okay, I'm going to change the status there. That's a little bit tedious, but I could close this branch of this over here. I could go to the find that in the browser window, and I could just go, okay, let's open that up in specification view. So in my design window, I've got specification view there. I can open that up, and again, remember, I can move this over to the side, and so now I've got this view at the same time. Now I've got no properties displaying there. If I use the field chooser, I can say, let's show status, and let's show version there as well. So now I've got those displayed. And this gives me a little bit more flexibility in changing them, because I've got a little drop down now, and I can just change them as I'm going along. Now that's okay, but what if you had 60 of them in that package? Then that becomes a little bit tedious. Let's do something else. Let's close this specification view for a moment, and let's put this all these elements into what's called info view. Now I'm just going to remove this guy here for a tick, so I'm going to change the virtual connector, take that off, and put this connector back there for the moment. Now I'm going to go into info view. See, what I might do is I'll leave that connector there. I can multi-select all the elements, right mouse click, and under appearance I've got this option here saying enable info view. Now even some experienced modelers haven't seen this before. It puts it into a different presentation style. And what I'm able to do with all those selected is I can go in here now and say which properties I want displayed in the diagram. Now I've got status status and version, but I could put any other ones in there as well, like phase if I wanted to as well. So I'll just Control Z out of that. But here you can see that we've got these elements all here. Now, let's have a look at another option for updating these, which is something which a lot of people may not have seen before. I can select this package in the project browser, and I can go to the design ribbon and the package panel and the manage icon and choose update status. Now, that brings up a window that allows me to select a status, a new phase, and a new version. So they're all, if you look in the diagram, they're all approved in their version 2.7. So let's make them, let's say that we have actually finished the work and they've been implemented. And let's change the version number to 3.1, for example. And let's apply that. You can see now that all the elements in the diagram have been updated, which is very useful and very powerful. But it has got some limitations, as you can see, because at the moment it has only been implemented for a couple of properties. That may change in future versions, where Sparx are very keen in seeing how a piece of functionality gets received and then updating it with more possibilities as we go. So let's have a look at another way we can do this. And the other sort of difficult thing is that it only applies to elements that are in a package. So if the elements weren't in that package, then we couldn't do them all at once. If they were scattered all over the repository, that wouldn't work. So let's look at another diagram here. We're going to look at the cruise domain diagram. So let's have a look at that diagram. Where are we? I think I've got it here in the cruise domain. Let's open that diagram up. And here we've got a bunch of elements. Let's go and look at these elements. And I think someone's run this before, but let me just go and look at these properties here for a minute and put these back. You can see I'm using some cartoony kind of names. It makes the modeling a little bit more fun when you're doing this kind of thing. Let's just change these back to what I had before. Let's have a look at this. So all of these elements now have got an author called Daffy Duck. Now they're not all in the same package as was the case with the other ones. If I right mouse click on them and say let's find in the browser, this one's in that location, this other one's in a different location, and so they're all in different parts of the repository. So what I'm going to use now is another one of the add-ins in our cookbook. And so rather than having to select a particular package, I could select these elements in the diagram if I wanted to, any number of elements anywhere, or I could multi-select them in the project browser. But I could also just go up to a level like at the enterprise and say, look, I want to make this change right across the enterprise. And the change I'm going to make, I'll have a quick look at this. Again, if you're a business person, put your sunglasses on for a minute. We're going to change the author. So this is a little add-in that we've built on a framework that allows you to make manipulations of repository. I presented on this last year in the 2021 Global Summit, and we're using the enumerables framework, which we've built into Enterprise Architect, and we can use a set-based syntax to be able to change things. So we're looking for any element that's got an author of Daffy Duck, that's of type class, and that's of stereotype utility. So in the where clause down here, we're saying where type equals the type, stereotype equals the from stereotype, and the from author. And then we're saying for each one of the ones that we find, let's set the property of author to the to author, which is in this case Tinkerbell. And we're going to look through packages, elements, and diagrams. And we're also logging a little bit of information there. So let's go and have a look and see how this runs. It doesn't matter whether we've got that diagram open or not. We're going to choose Enterprise there, and we're going to choose our Specialized. And this time our cookbook, our add-in has got a menu option here, and you can see that we can do things to all sorts of different parts of the model. But let's just choose Change Author. And you can see now that the add-in has run through and it's changed anything with Tinkerbell to anything with Daffy Duck to Tinkerbell. Now these elements haven't changed, and the reason they haven't changed is because this one is not a class utility, and this one doesn't have Daffy Duck as an author. So an example of how to use our refactoring framework, and you could build your own, to do complex additions or changes to the model. Now we do some very, very sophisticated manipulations of models that if you were to do it by hand could take literally hundreds of hours. So this provides a powerful refactoring. That's the benefit of it. It provides powerful refactoring of the repository, and you can see that the elements can be anywhere in the repository. The clauses here in the enumerables framework is searching across that framework, and you can see it's quite succinct. If you're used to using scripting, this particular syntax might seem a bit strange to you. If you're a programmer and use the enumerable framework in other languages, this will be familiar to you. But it's very, very powerful, and like I said, we've got a list of things that we can change the model, and it's quite easy. You could see that if you wanted to change it to a different author, you could just change Tinkerbell. If you wanted to apply to a different class, you could do that. Let's close that topic for now, and let's put that diagram to sleep. And let's have a look at glossaries. Now, the information you put into the Enterprise Architect repositories is important corporate information, but sometimes you need to get it out into other places, and a glossary is a good example of it. We have the ability with some of the features I'm going to show you to punch out glossaries from EA into XML and HTML that can be put straight onto a website, and you can publish the data for your customers that relates to your model, so they can see exactly what the meaning of some of your terms are. But also internally to the model, a lot of people need to see to see what elements mean. Now, where is the glossary? Well, those who are familiar with EA will know that I'm going to go to the design ribbon, and of course this changes with different versions. I think in 15.2 it was in a different location. That's part of the fun of a new version, is finding where all the goodies are. And here we have the glossary. So let's open up the glossary and have a look at that glossary view. So there it is. That's our glossary, and I can click on a term and look at it. And notice that there's a type there. So there's finance and technology. You can add any number of types that you want, and you might have different domains. I know large organizations might have different domains. Even within finance, they might have separate things. Now, how do we use that? Well, it's useful because we can include it in documents. We can people can look it up. But one of the really cool features in EA, which you may or may not have come across, but I'm going to cover it today, is the fact that if I go into the notes of an element, I'm just going to choose entity B here for this exercise, and rather than take my time up typing this, which when you're presenting, you generally make typing mistakes, which takes a lot of the theatre away. So I'm just going to paste something in. But you notice that when that's gone in, the word cybersecurity and the word fishing is underlined. And you can see there that comes up and it says it's from technology, so it's a technology one, and it's coming up and showing me that. I can control click on that and open up that guide. So that's a very, very useful thing. But one of the things that that came in version, I think 15.2, was the use of a glossary diagram. Now, this is all very well to go and type all these things into the glossary. It's quite handy. But what if I've already got lots of things in my model already that have names and have descriptions on them, notes on them? So, you know, for an example, let's go here and look at this. Whoopsie daisy. I'll go and look at this database. I've changed the location of that. So let me just go straight to the no, I'll go to the cruise database. So if we look at this this diagram here, those who are data modelers will recognize this as a physical data model, and from EA we can generate out DDL, database definition language, from this. But if we look at this, all of these elements have got notes on them. So, you know, that's kind of handy. What if I was to go, I want to, you know, those to be included into my glossary. I'll just close my glossary with a tick, and I'm going to go to my my glossaries package in my in here, and publications. I'll just find where that glossary package is. Enterprise Architect information glossaries. So it's under the information one there. It was in my staring me in the face. But here we've got our glossary. Now I'm going to look at this travel. Now I've constructed this diagram, and what I'm going to do with the diagram is I'm going to turn off the compartments. So I've turned off all the compartments except for the notes, and also on the diagram I'm going to do things to suppress all the labels, because I don't want it to look like a physical data model actually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these guys from the project browser, and I'm going to drag them onto my travel diagram. And neat little trick, select for all, and that will dump them all into the diagram. There they are. They've all gone in. They've got their connectors. It's not laid out very well. Let's choose something that might help us. Let's go for this circle one here and layout. That's quite useful. I can see the diagrams. I'm going to suppress in here. I want to suppress disable fully scoped names. Notice each element has got a tables prefix, which doesn't really make it any clearer for me. So I'll get rid of that. Now I'm going to save that. Save that. Now let's open up our glossary again, and now you can see that these elements have been added to the glossary. And magically, I didn't need to go and create new elements. I can obviously do that by going add new here and create a new element, but I didn't need to because in my diagram I already have these there. So that's all very nice. Now, what if I wanted to use those now in this? Let's get another text now, and let's choose another element and put some text in and see what happens with that. Let's go to another entity here. Oh, let's use the some of our other classes here. Maybe this class one here. I'll choose the notes, and let's just paste in some text. Again, a passenger, reservation, and a cruise, and so that's popping up again. This time it says travel. Now, the category travel is coming from the diagram, not the package, but the diagram. And you can see in the glossary here, it's saying that it's a model term. So that's a very, very useful, a useful thing that a lot of people don't seem to have seen before. So let's look at one more glossary thing, and then we'll move off glossaries. But another useful thing with glossaries is that I can use a pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pattern wizard here, and I'm going to choose my perspective, and my perspective is going to be publishing, and choose glossary, and I'm going to choose acronyms. Now here is a preset, pre-built glossary that's part of the wizards. A lot of things in the wizards are very handy. They produce a huge advantage for you if you haven't used them. There's more than 1,000 pre-built models and diagrams. All I have to do now with the package selected in the project browser glossaries is create the models. I'm going to accept that as the default, and bang, all of these guys have gone in. Now, if I was to go back to one of these entities and again, I'll use some pre-baked text that I've got, and I'll go to another entity in here. Let's go into class entity A, say there, and let's put in some text. Let's just load the glossary again. I don't think that's grabbed, so just before I put that text in, I'll just load the glossary again. That needs to make that work. And now we can see that the elements have been added to the glossary. And we'll select that that element entity A, and we'll put that text in now. And you'll see now that those pop up there. Now we've got a bunch of pre-formed glossaries that are quite useful, but that's a useful thing to put in. And if you want to contact me after the session, we can talk about other glossaries that are available. Let's close these glossaries for a minute now, and let's look at some other things. So I'll close all these other diagrams. So home here, close all except home. Now let's look at it, quickly look at some what I call user interface gadgets. So if I had a lot of diagrams open, and I can kind of do that by using working sets. I don't know whether many of you use working sets, but here's a working set. It's got a bunch of diagrams in it, and what it does is it enables me. It's reading a message here. Please display the presenter window to the side of the sorry. It's got a lot of diagrams. Now I can just launch this, and you can see what it's done is it's opened up a whole lot of diagrams for me. Very useful feature that you can use to have any number of working sets, but particular diagrams that you're working on, you might have two different roles and you have a set of diagrams that you regularly open up every day and work with. Now, the issue with all these diagrams being opened is that I get kind of a bit lost in these tabs and I have to keep, tabbing around, especially if I change one of these diagrams and I can't really know whether I can't see whether it's been changed or not. A very useful little, very, very small, probably the smallest little piece of user interface I've ever seen. This little arrow here brings me up a list of the diagrams that are open. I can also open user default diagram, but I can see the diagrams are open. I can see that the cruise diagram has got the asterisk, meaning that it's dirty, right? So that's a very useful thing. Another useful thing is this little chevron, another very small part of the user interface, but this is a very useful thing. It brings me up, I'll just save that diagram first. It brings me up a little, what I call the inline specification manager. So there's my diagram, and let's just use the portal window again. Let's go into wide view, make this a bit easier. Here I've got my elements, and next to it I can, I can see the notes on them, the name and the notes. Very, very handy, especially if there's an element there that's not got any notes and you're wanting to ensure that everything has been well documented. One last user interface thing, I'll jump out of this portals thing, go back into core modeling, is this little chevron to bring out the toolbox and put it away. Now I can pin that toolbox away, but this is a very useful thing to be able to bring the toolbox out. If your toolbox disappears for some reason, it might be because this little chevron is hiding it away. So that's a very useful thing. I'm going to look at one other thing, but we won't look at it in detail. I just want to mention it. EA's got two different levels of workflow. So I know in a lot of tools that people use, in other tools have got workflow. EA does as well, but they're not very well known. So I'm going to close all these diagrams again and say close all except home, and away they go. Now, group workflow. You need to have security enabled to be able to do this. But let's have a look and see how group flow would work. So settings, we go to administer and group workflow. So like I said, I'm not going to go into this in detail because we don't have the time to, but essentially what I can do is I can choose, allow users to be able to change particular status groups based on their security. So based on the security, I can say, look, let's allow one particular status to be changed from one value to another. Now, if I turn that on, I have to enable that. That will stop people from that haven't got permission to update the workflow. I just wanted to mention that quickly. there is another whole more sophisticated level of workflow that you can do. You'll need someone with administration, librarian sort of skills to be able to do it, but that's much more sophisticated and that can be turned on. But this is a lightweight one, which is quite useful and a lot of people don't seem to know about. So let's have a quick look at a couple of very simple things as well. Let's have a look at connectors and line styles. You can't multi-select connectors in EA. So let's have a look at another diagram. Let me just actually already done this exercise. So let me just mess this up a little bit. Apologies for that. Auto routing. Let's move this guy over here. Let's move this guy back to a different line style. Diagonal square and line style. And this connector here to line style custom. Drag some of these things around. Get some of these things messed up a bit. So with this line style feature, what you can do is, again, I'll put that as custom and move these things around. So one thing that people don't know about is the ability to reverse a connector as well. So if let me just check this line style, I'll have to do custom. And if this connector was around the other way, I can say use advanced and say reverse direction. Now I've changed the connector to the other way. I can change that connector back again. I'll just do the same thing, put it back reverse direction. But notice that I can't multi-select things. And so even if I put one of these elements where I want it, let's choose this guy here, and let's say we want the connector to be, the line style to be lateral vertical. So that's a nice little line style, I can do that. But none of these other ones, I have to go and individually do each one. But I'm actually able to select the connector, right mouse click, and then say apply line style for connectors of the same type. Now they're all changed that. I can now quickly lay out the diagram, put these guys down here a bit, grab them all, use the layout ribbon, and let's space them evenly down. Now we've got them all nicely lined up. So that's a little trick, applying the same line style. A lot of people seem not to know that little trick. The other one is a useful thing that people don't know about is this diagram toolbar. So let me just go into the preferences window and turn this off for a tick. If I wanted to start laying out this diagram, I can use the layout ribbon. But if then I started, doing some layout and I wanted to use some of the other ribbons, then the layout ribbon is hidden. What I can do is turn on a toolbar, which is kind of part of the probably version 12 in EA, which was didn't have the ribbons. I can't remember when the ribbons came in, but before the ribbons came in, the toolbars were very useful. There, I didn't turn that on. Ribbons perspective. No, I used large icon. I turned the wrong thing on there. Show the diagram toolbar. Now the diagram toolbar is there, and I can do things like, I could left align these two elements if I wanted to, or right align them, and I can use that. So that's a very useful thing, just to show that toolbar, and it's there. No matter which diagram you go to, the diagram toolbar will be useful to do that. Let's close these guys again and go back to our home. Diagram helpers. These are things which people don't seem to know a lot about, but are incredibly useful. So again, on the layout ribbon, let's have a look at these ribbons, and let's have a look at which diagram we're going to use for that. We're going to use the this process A diagram. So let's have a look at the ribbons, the helpers, I mean. Over here on the layout ribbon on the right-hand side, we've got the helpers. The sweeper is useful. I can grab whole sections of the diagram and move them somewhere else. So that's a useful thing. HV lock, horizontal vertical lock. I can choose an element, and if I start dragging in a particular direction, I can't drag outside that channel. So that's useful when you want to move elements around. And if I start dragging horizontally, again, I can't move out of that position. So quite useful. Another one is, I'll take those off, and I'll look at presentation. This is useful if you're presenting to people. So you can click on an element and it highlights the element. So that's a useful thing to do. And that highlight color is available through the preferences window. Now another useful thing is the show direction. So I can click on show direction with presentation on as well. So I'm using them both together. And you can see now that the lines that are on this diagram are showing up in different colors depending upon whether they're incoming or outgoing connectors. Now, sometimes, like on this diagram, there are arrows that will indicate that, but on other diagrams, you won't know what direction those are going on. So I could apply the same thing on one of the other diagrams. So let me just go to this one, and you can see here that the connectors are doing different things, and there's no arrows to tell me which way they're going. So that's a very useful thing to do. We'll skip over this other one, this perpendicular lines. But what we'll do now is we'll use this in conjunction with filters. So right next to the helpers are filters. I'm going to turn filters on. I'm going to say relationship filters. So here I can click on this, and it's filtering out anything other than the element I selected and the things that it's directly connected to, which is, again, a very useful thing to do. That show direction is quite useful. So we could use this in conjunction with other things, this presentation as well. We could turn on other filters, and we could say, look, let's turn on a filter for status, I think, and let's put in contained, and let's put 8LP. We could put the whole word approved in there, but we actually only need a couple of letters, and it finds out which ones there are. Validated again. I can look at that. Now, the interesting thing about this as well is that while those filters are on, I can go to a publication. If I had a publication with that element in it, which I do, you can see that if I refresh this, update this section in the document, it's only highlighting the things that are in my diagram. So if you've got filters on or any of these other things on, when you're presenting, when you're generating documents, then they can be incorporated into the document as well. It may not be something you want, so be careful when you're working with those ribbons. So that's a powerful thing. Let's have a look at something. Let's change tack completely now and have a look at something else. So again, we'll close these diagrams. So actually, let's have a quick look at one thing before we move on to that. With this diagram open, there are other two windows that we can look at, filters and layers. So they work differently. A filter applies across different diagrams. A layer only applies to the diagram that it's on. Now here's some filters we've got defined. Let's turn all of the, sorry, we've got some layers defined. Let's turn the layers off, all of them, and let's turn them on one by one. So here's activities and events, data objects. So you might want to just say, look, here's how the straight-through processing works, but here's how data is created and consumed. And then we can say, look, we want to link some information objects to that from a UML model as well and get more detail. We can do that. Or we might want to link our data store, which is an abstract in BPMN, an abstract information store, and we might want to link it to a database table. So that's very powerful. And we could also use filters as well, or we could use this filters one here, and we could say, look, let's apply a filter, and let's only look at what's business critical. So we've got a filter defined, and I can look at that filter, and it's going to say that the property is business criticality, the value is one of critical or high, and it's filtering out the things that are business critical. Now, this is very useful in presenting BPMN diagrams to an audience. So that's a very useful thing, and I can apply them together. You can see now I've applied both the layers and the filters. If I turn the layers off, I could just say, look, let's just look at that and go back to my filters. And again, it's only looking at those things. Let's change tact here a bit, and let's look at this one here. It's enterprise resources. So we'll close all these diagrams. I'll just go close that home there, I think, and that one there. And I'll go back to my home diagram, navigation home. Okay, let's have a look at resources. So this is interesting. Here oh, I've got some filters going on here, so let's turn off business criticality. So the filters you can see apply to all the diagrams. Now, not many people know that you can just include a Word document inside Enterprise Architect. So I can choose to put the diagram in, the document in as an external link or an internal link. So I can actually import this document into Enterprise Architect, or I can link to it in a different source. So it could be on SharePoint, it could be in another document repository. Same with Excel. I can bring up an Excel one. Same with PowerPoint. So those things can all be either linked or embedded into Enterprise Architect. And I could bring up an external one as well. And this, I'll just drag this on another screen. It's coming because I've got a monitor open there. And here we've got, a link to an external resource, which is the Archimate specification for modeling enterprise architectures. So that's very useful. And that also, we can also look at the model library, and that's another place where we could put our standards in. Again, Archimate could be there. We could load them into to that as well. I'm just going to look at a couple of other things. Got so much to tell you, and there's so many more things I could be presenting. So just kind of picking some of the ones that might be more useful. Capability modeling in enterprise architecture. Here's a use of multiple legends on the diagram. So these are dynamic legends. They change. If I go into the legend and look at the definition, they change based on model properties. So if I go in here and look at the tags, you can see that there's a percentage technology finish that someone's included into that. I can't change that at the moment. Included into that element. And also we've got this recent technology refresh, which is using the outline of the element. So two different legends, and they're applying different visualizations to the elements in the repository. Very, very powerful. One other thing I just want to quickly show you as well is, let me have a look at this, ports and interfaces. Let's click out of this. Yes. I've got that on this diagram. Let's go and look at our browser window under architecture applications. I've got lots of things open here at the moment. Applications, have a look. Here, this is an interesting thing. This is a UML component model, and you can see the model has used ports and interfaces. Now, this is very powerful when you're wanting to do things as a solution architect and present them, but it can be annoying to other people. So there is now a feature here to collapse embedded elements, right? So let's just move this thing along a bit here. Collapse embedded elements. So I can do that, and then there's also another option in this latest version to be able to display the labels. So again, that's very, very handy. So there's a whole range of other things that I've got in my toolbox to show you, but this particular one is useful. It makes the diagrams more appealing to non-technical audiences, and it saves time because there is no need to recreate a simplified diagram. You can just use the same diagram. We have a number of government clients in Australia that use this feature. So I'm going to, we're very close to time now. I just want to make a couple of reflections. I've been working with Enterprise Architect for, like I said, more than 21 years. A lot of what I've learned has been learnt from the people that I've worked with. So I thank all the people that I've worked with over the years. We've done lots of research. We do lots of research, and we obviously have a very close connection as the service arm with the product arm, and we're in constant communication about how to improve the product. What's happening in the trenches. The product team listen to everything that we're saying, and they implement features that are useful to our customers. There are lots and lots of things. I've probably covered 10% of what I could cover in tips and tricks. I hope that it's been useful to you. Don't worry if you are new to EA and you can't see all of the, you haven't been able to comprehend everything that's going on. But you can go back and look at the video, and that will give you the time to look at these things more carefully. You can also look up the help. But by and by as well. I just want to thank you for spending the time with me this afternoon. And if you'd like to connect, please join me on LinkedIn and let's start a conversation about your modelling practice. Very happy to give you any free advice, very happy to engage with you or your organisation to provide some lightweight services, do some evaluations of your models and the way that you're working to make you more efficient and do the good work that you need to do. So thank you very much and happy modelling.
Thank you, Stephen. As said, the video will be shared by early next week to all the participants. That will help the participants to keep a track of this video and make the best use of your efforts. Thank you, Stephen. So I have a couple of questions here. I'll just read out one or two here and paste the rest in the Teams channel for you to take forward for the detailed answer. So the first one is from John, asking, do you have these tips documented anywhere? Are there any books available for the same?
Yeah, we do. We can provide both the model and the presentation notes. So I just quickly flip that onto my screen. If you look at that, you'll see that all of these things are documented in this script, and so we're quite happy to provide that script to you afterwards, which has got, you can see it's got the tip and all the steps that you need and the benefits that you're going to get. So if you connect with me in LinkedIn, I'm happy to provide that for you. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you. And a couple of questions from Bob. The first one is, does element virtualization works for elements that have a child diagram?
Does it work with elements that have a child diagram? Yes, it would. I'm just presuming if you mean that will the element show up in the child diagram. I'm not 100% sure about that. It will work on the diagram that you've got open. If you click through to the underlying diagram, I think you would need to put the element, virtualize that one as well, but I'll double check for you. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. As we reach the end of the hour, I'll just paste the rest of the questions in the Teams channel for you to provide the answers.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Thanks to everyone for your time during the session. Now, Stephen will be available in MS Teams to have a detailed discussion and answer more questions. The link to Microsoft Teams is pasted again in the chat window for your quick reference. If anyone is having any difficulty in connecting to Teams, please reach us in the chat window. We will stay here for a couple of minutes or write to us at registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. Thanks once again, everyone, and looking forward to host you all in another wonderful session at this summit shortly. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.